Support comes from Hampton Roads Community Foundation, partnering with donors from all walks of life to improve southeastern Virginia through grants, scholarships, and leadership initiatives. Learn more at hamptonroadscf.org.
Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. So a week from today, many of us will sit down to a table full of delicious holiday fare, surrounded by loved ones who've come near and far to celebrate Thanksgiving together. Now, will you have a Hallmark dinner full of love, laughter, sharing of family stories, celebrating one another? Or will your table be full of tension, strife, and disagreements? What do you do when the family just doesn't get along? Some advice from relationship expert Dr. Alvean Lyons. That's next on Another View, right after this national, regional, and local news from NPR and WHRO News.
Discussing today's topics from an African-American perspective, this is Another View.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. Before we get started today, I always like to tell you about some things happening in the community. Pardon me. And so if you are interested in public transportation, which is huge for everyone, there is a State of Transit Means Business Conference. That's coming up on November the 28th. From 8 until 10:45 at Hub 757. That's on Bridgeway Drive in Suffolk. Now, this is being put on by Hampton Roads Transit, Williamsburg Authority Transportation, and also Suffolk Transit. And they are talking about workforce development and the regional economy and the impact of transit on both. So if you are interested in how transit can help enhance our community, make sure you go to gohrt.com. That's gohrt.com for more information and to register for that conference. And also, Grace Episcopal Church has something really special going on. Now, this is Saturday, December the 9th, and it is at the Regal Cinema Theater in Columbus Regal Movie Theater in Virginia Beach. And they are doing a Skin of Color Winter Skin Care Health Fair. That's from 10 until 12. And then at noon, they're showing an advanced screening of the remake of The Color Purple at the movie theater. So you can come and participate with the skincare health fair, and then from there see the movie, The Color Purple. Now, you do have to purchase tickets for the movie, and to do that, you call 757-625-2868, 757-625-2868, and they will take good care of you. So thank you very much, Grace Episcopal Church and the Transit Means Transit Conference. 'Tis the season. Now, for some, that phrase elicits warm thoughts, memories, and excitement. For others, it signals dread, anxiety, and that feeling of, I just can't wait till this is over. If the second description rings true for you, we have some help. Joining me on Another View is our favorite relationship expert and Another View Roundtable pundit, Dr. Alvean Lyons. Hey!
Hey!
We missed you last week.
I missed you guys too, but I was doing family.
You were doing family. And how was your dad's
My
birthday?
My dad's 80th birthday was last weekend. So we had to celebrate him big. And this is so apropos for our show, families may not be perfect, but the gift of having them still, that's one of those things that we have to decide to step past the imperfections, to really just be excited for the fact that I still get to argue with you. Thank God you're still here.
Absolutely. So did the entire family gather, and where were you guys?
Yeah. So we were in Hampton. So my parents live in Long Island, New York. Mm-hmm. And so they came down. My dad insists on driving so that he can exercise his ability to break the speed limit. And the rest of the family flew in, which which was wonderful. And so we're a pretty big crew when we get together.
Wow.
We're like 26, 27 of us, and everybody was here. And
Everybody
so
was at your house.
everybody was here. So not just at my house. My sister and I live across the street from each other. So we're spread out between there. And then my mom got some timeshares in Williamsburg so that everybody wasn't on top of each other. But it didn't stop us from, doing that as often as we possibly could, because we love a good competition too. So we had to do game night, stay up all night, figure out who the winner was and who we were going to make fun of for losing. So we had a wonderful time
It was a good
together.
time.
It
That's
was.
great.
It really was.
So, Alvean, why are so many of us so stressed out about the holidays? Because there really are a lot of people. We, in our production meeting this morning, we had a couple of people going, you know what? I'd be just as really happy as
If we could just skip this.
Yep.
Right.
If Thanksgiving could just go away.
So what's interesting about that is, so the holidays just give us like a touch point to be able to look at that. But the reality is, when you think about a whole bunch of family coming together, the holiday just allows us to be able to identify specific times in which that happens. But when a large amount of family get to the same place, that by itself can be kind of stressful, especially if the family dynamics are such that some folks feel like it's a little performative, that I have to look happy even if I'm not. Some folks know that, there's a hierarchy in our family, so I need to respect those who are older, even though they're obnoxious and mean. Like some folks, have to tolerate people who don't like to teach their children any level of discipline whatsoever. So they're running amok through your house or through whatever venue you guys are together. There are so many familial dynamics that are present. And because so often we don't feel like we're free to tell the truth about how we feel about those dynamics, because it's going to upset
And because
things.
we can't divorce our family.
No,
we can
we're
walk
stuck
away
with
from
them.
a friend. Or if somebody was a friend
I
or
can break
whatever,
up with
you
you.
can break up with you. Right.
Right.
But you can't break up with
But
your
you cannot
family.
break up with family. And so the pressure of having to try to hold it together, particularly in families where you tend to avoid conflict, those are spaces where people are kind of like, I'm just looking forward to getting to the other side of this. And that's not to say that there aren't folks that are so excited about having their family all together. It's just to say that depending upon the relational dynamic inside the family has a lot to do with how people feel about everybody getting together.
I'm going to put out the phone number early so that people can call in and ask
And join
you
the conversation.
their questions. Absolutely. 757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. So are you going to have a Hallmark holiday, or are you kind of stressed out because you're worried about what the dynamics are going to be once everybody arrives? 757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Do you think we also, especially if you're the planner for the event, put so much pressure because what we see from the world, and social media doesn't help,
Oh, I
because
hate
everybody's
social media.
perfect on social media, of course.
Of course,
You know,
of course.
so everybody has a perfect meal and everybody
Yeah,
has
has the perfect
everything,
family
the
and-
perfect
yeah.
family and so forth. And so does that also help to add to
Oh, for
that
sure.
added stress?
Oh, for sure. Because the more we do this, and that I love what social media was intended for, in the sense that it gives us the opportunity to stay connected with one another. I mean, originally it was like being able to have an entirely human photo album in which we all get to participate in each other's lives, right? It was just these snapshots of great moments, funny moments, messy moments, whatever that was. And it was beautiful when it first started. But not too long after that, folks decided that they were going to turn that space into a space to work out their own issues. And in that became a pursuit of mini fame, in essence. So social media now became very performative also. Now I need to look perfect, the flawlessness of it all. Now everybody and their mother uses filters. We all know what you look like in real life. We know that that's not your real nose. Stop it. So but yet we literally are obsessed with creating this false sense of perfection. And in that pursuit of perfectionism always comes with shame. Perfectionism always comes with shame. And because of that, many of us are swimming in the shame of the reality of our lives. So we do this kabuki theater for everyone. And that's where the pressure comes on, when I have to look like something that isn't authentic to who I am. And now I've got to maintain it, because if anybody bought into it, I feel like I've got to keep this image up. And most of the time it's in our heads, because the truth is most of us don't believe you anyway. So like we're doing it to ourselves. It's self-imposed pressure. So when you add that to just the normal human things that go on in relationships every day, the idea of having family together all in one space, trying to get it just right with a whole bunch of humans who do anything but get it just right, that's where the pressure comes. That's where the stress comes. And if you're the planner for all of it, trying to make sure that everybody has a good time and everybody's happy and everybody, all of those things, it's unnecessary levels of stress we put on ourselves.
Absolutely. 757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. What questions do you have for Dr. Alvean Lyons on how to create space and peace at your holiday table today? 757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. All right, let's talk about some specifics. Blended families. Okay, so if you are a part of a blended family and you're used to either being with one side or the other side, how do you bring people together? Or should you try? Because
that's where I was going to go.
There may be, some opportunity, some dynamics where you just don't mix the two.
Right. So I'm a blended family in a non-traditional way, in the sense that my oldest daughter is adopted, right? And so she has her biological family, and then she has us, right? So we don't mix at all. Not even a little bit. And we never have, to be very honest. So the knowing that part of taking care of her and loving her is making room for her to be able to happily enjoy that side of her family, the biological side of her family, and then enjoy the time that she spends with us, and those two things not competing with one another. And what we had to learn to do is to not treat her as if she was the bone in the middle of two sets of dogs. And what happens sometimes in blended families is the goal of this is my child, or this is my person, this is my brother, this is my spouse. Whenever we go to the my in it, we start to carve up the people that we love the most. When in fact, one of the most beautiful things we can do is to let go of the bone, so that they have the freedom to know that if I need to be in this other space, because if I'm not, it's going to cause way more problems, that you love me enough to let me go so that I can do the thing that will help reduce the amount of pain and stress that I'm navigating inside of my world.
How old was she when she decided to spend that time? And what was that dynamic for you? I'm just curious. As much as you can share.
It was complicated early on, and because she was young, she was 14 when we adopted her. So, and I don't mean baby, which makes it different, right? Her coming into our world when she did in her life, she has healthy, connected relationships. And and long established ones, right? And then we are a very traditional family, and we have all kinds of things that we do every single year. So originally, you just assume that your baby's going to be part of all of that without thinking about the impact on the other side of the family. And so early on, we really started to realize, okay, we're starting to carve up this kid, who's going to be, where's she going to be at Thanksgiving? Where's she going to be at Christmas? Is she going to wake up here at Christmas? Is she going to leave after that? And watching what it does to the child really was the reason that we had to, as adults, back up and just make room. And this is not a religious show, but there is a story in biblical text that speaks to two quote unquote moms fighting over a child. And the arbiter of the fight ultimately says, okay, if we can't decide who the baby belongs to, we'll cut the baby in half, right? And so then the real mom says, I will give up the baby. And she ends up getting the baby because only a real mother would let go to save her child than to just cut her child in half in order to make sure I get my piece, right? And so an act of love sometimes is the letting go of our person so that they can be whole navigating challenging situations. So for us, we had to get past ourselves and our desire to, we want to have all of our babies home and we wanted this and we wanted that, to remember the fact that she is a whole human, a little human, navigating a complicated dynamic with adults who have their own stuff and their own egos and their own fears, worries, and hurts. And we can't put that on her to navigate. We are old enough to get past our feelings to make room for her to be healthy. So eventually we kind of found all right, she does Thanksgiving with them, she does Christmas with us. And then we started to learn to create holidays, as in, if you do Thanksgiving on this day, we can also have our own Thanksgiving on another day. So it's not an either or equation.
Right.
And I remember struggling when my husband's parents were alive. They both passed away. But I remember struggling with my very traditional family, the expectation that I was home, and he came from a very connected family, and the expectation that he was home. So the holidays were super stressful because my parents never wanted to give up an hour for me to be someplace else, because my whole life you've been with us. So this dude comes into the family and all of a sudden we don't have you anymore. So now you're looking at my husband as if he's taking me away from you, but his family's looking at the same thing as if we're taking him away from us. So when you tell me to go marry somebody who has very strong familial roots, understand that that has impact come holidays.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So it was very stressful trying to navigate that.
Is that something that you think that couples should talk about? Like,
for sure.
You know how we look at all of the things you talk about, money, you talk about, how your child raising mores and skills and,
Yes.
and all of that. The whole idea of, who gets Thanksgiving, who gets Easter, who gets Christmas,
New Year's,
who gets
yeah, all of that. And I would say so, because I didn't think about it. Never occurred to me that that was going to be a thing when married, because you just kind of assume that your partner's just going to be with you. It doesn't even really cross your mind that you might have to be the person who changes the way that you're doing things. And then we do holidays so differently, like we were the sit down Cosby Show kind of family. You had a formal dinner, everybody was dressed nicely, and it was a bit stuffy. So we're a little bit more that family, and his was the buffet, food all through the kitchen, food in the dining room, everybody's laughing, a football game is on, and truth be told, I actually enjoyed the holidays because I was wearing jeans and a t-shirt and everybody seemed happy, but it became a thing for my parents.
So when you talk about, not putting the child through those dynamics, what if you're in a relationship where the children are grown and maybe don't get along with the other spouse, and so forth? How do you navigate that?
Oh, that's a real thing. That is a real thing.
Yeah,
and considering in our current society, there are so many of us who are remarried or blended families. There's so many of those. We are not just the old school traditional, family, same mom, same dad, grew up forever kind of situations. We are a different multicultural, multi-dynamic, multi-generational, multi-everything kind of sets of families now. And so one of the things that we have to come to is a realization that our goal should be less about the way we do things than it is about the ultimate experience we want to be true in the end. And what I mean by that is that if the holidays are about love and not materialism, because that's a whole nother part of this conversation,
exactly.
right? And if the holidays are less about the tradition of you are here or I'm there, but more the tradition of togetherness, we've got to focus on the mission rather than the moment, right? And you've heard me talk about that before, that the mission has to be greater than the moment. So the moment may be about Thursday, that's Thanksgiving, right? But if the mission is together and together doesn't work in its traditional sense, you, me, the kids, and the new spouse, if that doesn't work, then perhaps the mission of togetherness now means that we get creative. I have Thanksgiving with my spouse and we enjoy our moment, or I have Thanksgiving with my kids and we enjoy our moment. And then I have another Thanksgiving opportunity with the whichever party I didn't have it with separately, so that we can enjoy the together that we are committed to, rather than it being an obsession about everybody has to be in the same space.
Yeah.
If we find that that is more toxic, it's more likely to create unnecessary relational traumas and trust fractures. We've got to get past that it must be like this, rather than for us to focus on, my goal is to make sure that this holiday, I've had an opportunity to tell you that I love you and to spend quality time with you. And if that's what it's really about, then it doesn't have to be about whether it's Thursday or whether it's the 25th of December.
So who has to be the mature one? Because I mean, honestly, because some people may feel, okay, if I do all of that, but yet I feel like I'm the one who's giving
Always
up,
having to sacrifice,
and I'm always
right.
having to be the one to sacrifice. I mean, at some point, or does it matter, or just is it just about somebody's got to take
some
the
grown up
lead?
has to come into the room, right?
Yeah.
And because if we're always waiting for the other person, you'll be waiting forever. So sometimes when the responsibility of leadership is to do the hard thing. And in doing the hard thing, it sometimes means the sacrificial thing, right? And so as parents, even with our adult children, which is just a piece of work all by itself, okay? Because they're old enough now that you would expect that you can have very logical conversation with them, right? And very logical negotiations with them. But the parent-child dynamic is so strong that it almost doesn't matter that they are old enough to know better or to understand. It doesn't change the fact that you're my mommy and you're my baby, and that's not my daddy, and that's not my mommy, and that's not my... Oh, it's amazing how the familial dynamics will take you right back to childhood.
And it's almost when the adult children are almost worse than if you were to
if they were
marry or somebody, if they were babies.
When they're babies,
absolutely.
Yeah. Because as adult children, they have all of the grown-up attitude. They have all of the grown-up lexicon. They have all of the grown-up perspectives, because they would like to read you for filth as a parent sometimes on how you should have and why didn't you and how you've abandoned me and how you... All of those things will happen as a byproduct of the fact that they are adults. But they are adults. They're walking in adult bodies. But who you're having the conversation with more often than not is the little girl or the little boy on the inside of them. And the little girl and the little boy on the inside of each of us governs so much of what it is that we do. Our responsibility as we mature is to be able to have a conversation with that little child on the inside, to reassure them that we are okay and we don't have to fight for this space. And you're not in jeopardy because we need to do the following things. That I still have your back and I'm thinking about you when I'm making this decision to go, to not go, to say, to not say, to spend time or to not spend time. I'm thinking about you. So we don't have to have a tantrum right now in a way that's going to cause more problems, because I, the grown-up me, is going to make sure that I make the kinds of decisions that is thoughtful of the child you that's on the inside. But it requires an enormous amount of honesty with self, because we think that because we're grown-ups that everything in us has grown, and that's not true. There is always an inner child that is still speaking and is still looking for protection and is still looking for affirmation and I still look for the affirmation of my parents. I still want them to be proud. That's not 40-something-year-old me doing that. Yeah. That's the little girl on the inside that wants to make her mommy and daddy proud. And if I'm not careful, sometimes some of the decisions that I'm making are out of that child orientation rather than the adult me being able to speak to that child and say that it's okay. I'm already proud of you. So it doesn't really matter what else is happening. I'm proud of the hard work that you did and what we went through together this year, even if nobody else claps for us.
It's a lot to think about.
It is.
It's a lot to think about. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call to join our conversation. We're talking about navigating family dynamics during the holidays with relationship expert and leadership consultant, Dr. Alvean Lyons, 757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Okay, so we're sitting around the table and your favorite uncle starts in on whatever, the political conversation or the race conversation or the, name it.
Uh-huh.
Outside of screaming, shut up.
Right.
What are some ways that we can navigate around that person so that it will keep things
very peaceful?
As peaceful as possible.
Right.
Yes.
Well, so there are two things that I think are very important in situations like that. One is that preparation has a lot to do with what outcomes look like, right? So, for instance, I know that there's certain individuals inside of my family who are more prone to trigger conversations, right?
Okay.
And so because I know that that is true, a lot of times I will have conversations with them prior to
ask you
us
that.
getting together.
So you will literally go to them to say,
absolutely.
Look, we're not going to
Let
do
me tell
this
you what
this
we're
time."
not going to do today. So, and sometimes you might not be the one who can do it. Sometimes you have to use your resources, right? So there might be a sibling, an auntie, a cousin who's the right person to be the messenger for the chaperone around this person who loves to, stir it up and, drop bombs, right? Like, so we have those. Every family has at least one, right? And so we have those in our family too. And in my family, I happen to be the person who will typically, yank the chain on on what we're not going to do today, right? But the way that you do it is also important, right? Because it's important that you don't make the person feel bad for the fact that they have these big thoughts, big ideas, or big feelings. But I've found it to be most effective when I have a sense of what that person wants to accomplish, right? Because sometimes what the person wants is attention. Sometimes what they want is engagement. Sometimes what they want is affirmation. Sometimes what they want is I just want everybody in the same place. And, if they're older, I don't know how much time I have. So I want to get out all my thoughts and feelings with the time that I have left with everybody, right? And all those things may be true. My job is to remind you of what your real goal is, right? And to let you know that if you do this thing, it's not just that you're working against the rest of us. You're working against yourself when you do this. So if your goal is connectivity, but every time you bring this up, you watch everybody isolate you or you watch a fight happen, right? Then you're working against your own goal. So this year or this time we get together, what we're going to do is not do that. So that we can make sure that the thing that you actually want, we create the environment for that to be true. Because if connection is what you want, and every time you bring up this subject, you find that everybody isolates you, then we're not going to bring up that subject this year. And we're going to watch and see how the connection works. Because the more we're able to do that and you're able to see the positive reaction of you not participating in the trigger behavior, the more likely we're able to get that positive reinforcement to minimize doing those things over and over again.
So what if you are the recipient of the trigger? What,
Been there.
I'll be honest, 'cause I can remember when my mother was alive and God rest her soul, but every holiday there had to be some kind of conversation about my weight. It just and she would always preface it with, "I'm just concerned about your health," and I get that,
Right.
I got that,
Right.
but not as I'm putting a piece of pie in my mouth.
Right. Not now, Mom.
I mean, not now. And it would always happen, and I would always feel bad, and and then you get over it because you kind of knew it's coming. But what are some healthy ways
To be able to do
deal
that.
with the triggers?
Well,
Yeah.
so I would ask first, if you know the person's intent, so you're using your mom as a perfect example. And for most of us who are listening, our parents are almost always the trigger. Okay, let's just be honest about it. Almost always, because they can touch us.
They can
in ways
they can make us feel like
nobody else
exactly.
can. Nobody else can. And we get mad at ourselves for letting ourselves get upset or bothered by it in a way that we know we wouldn't if it was anybody else. It would just roll off of us like water off a duck's back. But when it's your parents, they have this unique ability to be able to get that arrow right between your rib cage, straight into the heart. Like it's amazing, right? But we are also parents now, and we do the same things to our children. Okay, just for the record. Okay, so we are equally as guilty. Just for the record, we are guilty too. So if you know that the intention of the person that is coming from, the parent in particular, is that they genuinely are concerned.
Yeah,
right?
and I know she was.
And let's just say that we're going to give her that, right? That she's genuinely concerned. And so watching you participate in the behavior that she's concerned about, it's hard for her to not say something, because in her mind, it's the equivalent of watching a train coming from you for you, and she's not pushing you off the tracks, right? That's how it is for her, right? But for you, it's like getting run over by that train, right? Like you're having two very different experiences inside the same moment, right? So the grown-up us, because it's harder when you're a child, but the grown-up us can pause and say, Mom, I know that you're worried about my weight. I get it. And I know that you love me. I get that too. But I want you to know that every time you bring it up, I want to eat 5 pies right in front of your face. Okay?
Yeah,
that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
So if we could manage to not have this conversation now, and we could have this conversation at some other point when I'm not in the middle of just not
trying to enjoy dinner.
just enjoying myself and not counting calories for just a second, because believe it or not, I do it every other day. That just for one day, I just don't want to do that. If we could just do that, I promise you we can have a productive conversation about this at some other point. But if we do it here, it's going to change how I feel about this moment with you, and it's going to change how I feel about you, because I'm going to feel like you're really not seeing me. All you see is my imperfection, and I know you love me, and that can't be true. So sometimes we've got to acknowledge what their mission is, what their goal is. And sometimes it even means that we project onto them a positive intention. And then we say that I believe that to be true. And because I believe that to be true, here's what we should do instead, so that you can actually achieve your mission. So it's how we go about it that sometimes makes a difference, and sometimes a significant one, and how we get out of that moment. If people are unwilling to do that more positively, sometimes we have to just excuse ourselves and be someplace else so that we don't have to have this exchange. But more often than not, if we confront people about the things that they're actually doing in a way that is non-judgmental and loving, despite the hurtfulness with which they may be approaching us, you'd be amazed how willing people are to acknowledge that this, I didn't mean for it to come out that way.
And hurt you that way.
Yeah, especially when they love you.
I tell you, it's a lot to it, isn't it? So what's alcohol got to do with it?
Oh, jeez. Let me tell you that for me is one of the things, as I'm a non-drinker, and I don't judge anybody who does drink. I was an athlete, so it was drinking meant the difference between first place and second place, right? And when I got used to that way of living, it just never changed for me as I became an adult. But what I'm always concerned when the person who is most likely to be the person to drop the bomb is drinking too much. I'm always concerned. And more often than not, you can't control them because they're losing their guard.
Yeah,
that's starting to fall apart. That sometimes what ends up happening instead is you need to have conversations with the people who are engaging with them to be able to say, listen, Uncle so-and-so enjoying that Moscato a little bit too much. Okay, so you know where this can go. I want you to go ahead and put on your Superman cape right now put on your shield, because there's no telling what could come next. But we do better when we know that something is happening or getting ready to happen or could happen. It's when things slap us unexpectedly that you get the most negative responses, right? So our goal is to try to have the most positive experience we can. And that often is by getting ahead of whatever that exchange could potentially be.
I find it so interesting that we haven't gotten any calls. I think people don't want to tell on their family members. That is just incredible. But we do have a question from Facebook. Liz from Chesapeake wrote, if you know there's a person who won't listen ahead of time, how do you tell them not to come?
Oof.
I mean, is that okay to not invite a family member? In particular, it's different between friends and family.
Yeah, it's definitely different. And because you have to see, that requires a level of calculation, right? You've got to figure out, is the coming or not coming, which one is going to have a bigger consequence? Yeah. Because sometimes,
because if you don't invite them, then
sometimes it's even worse.
It'll be
right?
worse. Absolutely.
So you have to, and only you know that based on what the dynamic is inside of your family, that the disinvite is even worse than the invite and having to navigate those challenges. Mm-hmm. But if you have the kind of family in which people will only show up based on invitation and they will respect those invitations, and it's not going to come with you having to be punished for that later, then by all means, I would definitely encourage you to not invite the individual that is problematic and you know that they're problematic, mm-hmm. right?
Our producer, Lisa, says, tell them I'm going to bring you a plate.
And that can be done too. And you know what's interesting also, we recently had a little gathering, and there I didn't share the address with folks that I didn't want to show up. So because I didn't do it at my house. We did it at a venue. And if I wanted you to be present, I would have told you where the venue was. I didn't share that information broadly so that we wouldn't get any random pop-ups. And sometimes the safe way to ensure that doesn't happen is don't have it at home. And only the people that you want present have the address for where you're going to be. Sometimes we just have to be very practical.
Exactly, just to keep the peace.
Particularly if you're dealing with somebody that can be very problematic. There's a difference between somebody who can be annoying or ruffle a couple of feathers that you can easily quell, but when you're talking about something that is traumatic for folks, and there are those family members that are just that toxic sometimes, mm-hmm. that's a different conversation.
So what about as especially as adult children, start having families of their own mm-hmm. and so forth. Mm-hmm. When is the appropriate time, or is there an appropriate time for them to start creating traditions of their own? Mm-hmm. When we were growing up, to me, it was unheard of. I mean, you were going to your parents' house and that was it.
End of discussion.
But is it okay to move forward?
And the answer is it's absolutely okay. As in, we all have the right to build whatever we want to build for our families. Mm-hmm. But okay is different than accepted, right? So it is absolutely okay that we all want to have our own traditions, but mm-hmm. will that be accepted by the family is a slightly different conversation. Because if you're dealing with a family that is deeply rooted in tradition and you decide that you want to build your own tradition, it could be seen as a rejection of the family. So it's a matter of being able to navigate what is that dynamic inside of your family. And no two families are the same. If we did that in my family, it would be seen as a rejection of tradition. But there are ways and spaces in which we have evolved during the holidays that and it's the thing that I was referencing before, that we've moved away from it has to be this way to this is what we want the experience to ultimately be. And that has given us room to manipulate, and I mean that in the most positive of ways, mm-hmm. manipulate the way we do things. So mm-hmm. that has included, Thanksgiving used to always be at my parents' house. But one, we're too big for my parents' house now. Mm-hmm. With 26 of us mm-hmm. and all over the United States, we're too big to all be at their house. So that changed. Then we started going to my husband's technically he's my husband's best friend, but he's practically a brother to us. His aunt's house, she has a beautiful beach house, and that was no sacrifice. So we started,
we'll be there.
Yeah, we started going over there, and then we started bringing the people who used to come to our house. We started taking them over there with us because it's a soul food kind of house, like everybody's welcome kind of thing. So we started taking them with us with permission, of course. And then next thing you knew, my parents started coming down and going too, and I would have never thought that would have happened because they're so traditional. But when you start to focus on if our goal is together and our goal is love, and you guys are older, you're retired now. We don't have but a couple of days for Thanksgiving. So traveling is very hard when you're the ones with the younger kids in school. They're only out for 2 days. That was much harder for us than it was for my parents.
It's funny when you mention that, because I remember at Christmas time when I was single mom and living in New Jersey, and I remember vividly packing the trunk Christmas Eve because Tiffany and I were going to get in the car and drive to Baltimore and then put the present under the tree in Baltimore. So you go through all these shit because that's the tradition. And then when we moved here, the first time I asked my parents, I said, well, why don't you all come here for Christmas? And oh my gosh, my father, my mother was fine, but my dad was like,
my house too.
Excuse me?
Yeah.
This
Whose
is where
child
Christmas
are you?
is. Exactly.
Right. That was absolutely, that's my family too. It's my dad. My dad is a traditionalist to his core.
Yeah.
And as the patriarch of the family, that was a non-negotiable for him. But the reality was that we had the little people, and it was hard to be able to make that work. And eventually we just had to accept the fact that we can only manage to do this and this work well. Right. And eventually, because when he began to focus on what do you really want? Do you really want us to be together? What's really important?
Yeah.
And eventually that began to shift. But it's only because we had no choice. And there were times that we didn't make enough money for us to be able to be gone as long as it would take to drive up to New York, to spend, because it was 9 hours, to spend a couple of days with them, to turn back around, to go back to work. I mean, it was just, it was expensive. Yeah. It was tiring. I mean, there were so many things that made it difficult, that it was such a gift when he finally let go enough for us to all manage to do what we needed to do.
Let's talk about etiquette and family, because sometimes people think that anything else that you would do at a stranger's home, it's not. You don't have to worry about that when you're at mama house,
right?
You know what I mean?
Right.
And that you can let things go. But still, this should still be kindness, and there should still be certain appropriateness.
Yeah.
At either place, correct?
Yeah. And know that what you do at your house is between you and your house.
Right.
But what you do at anybody else's house is them and their house, right? So you've got to keep in mind that I am a guest, no matter whether we're family or not. I'm still a guest in your space, and I need to know what's okay and what's not okay in your space. That is an act of respect, and respect should always be partnered in love, right? So I am a feet up on the couch kind of person, but that does not mean when I go to someone else's house that they're comfortable with that. So when people come to my house, I expect you to take your shoes off, but we're going to pile up like puppies on my couch, right? But when I go to someone else's house, there are lots of houses where it's expected you keep your shoes on because this is not your house. So you're visiting, and let's not get too cozy because you're leaving also.
Because you're going to
So my house, I want your shoes off. I want you cozy. I want you relaxed. I want you to feel like you're in your second home. That's what I want when you're at my house, but that is not what everybody wants.
I'm smiling because I remember a perfect thing when Maxie and I, my husband, and I were engaged, and we had spent our first Christmas with my parents, and he and I had been out for the evening, and my dad met us at the door, and he said, "Man, let me show you where your room is," because in their house,
if you're not married, you are not sleeping together.
You are not sleeping in the same room in the same space.
That was the rule in mine too. That was the rule in mine too.
So paying attention, whether it's your mother's house or not, being mindful.
And you were
and I was
adult.
50 years old.
I was just going to say that. You were a full-blown
adult.
Total and complete adult. And still, there are rules at your parents' house.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's okay. It's totally okay. If you don't pay the bills there, you don't get to make the decisions there. That's how that works. Whoever's paying the bills gets to make the decisions.
Absolutely. For your own mental health.
Yes.
If there is real trauma.
Yes.
Within family.
Which can be
and so
absolutely
forth.
True.
Should you worry? You should protect yourself as opposed to trying to make others happy. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
In other words, and we're not talking about, a political argument. I'm talking about serious,
real stuff. Right.
Yeah.
And the answer is yes. You can't leave it to somebody else to be responsible for your care and your health. Right. I mean, we would love to know that in all families that there is a genuine concern for one another, and we do whatever we can to protect each other. But sometimes traumas are secret. Sometimes we haven't told the whole story, or we don't know how to communicate about the whole story. Right. And so whatever that process is, whatever it is that we need, we are going to have to take care of ourselves inside of that. Now, to have partners is wonderful. Family members who get it and they're helping to be supportive of you. But that's not always a guarantee. So sometimes it means we have to set up and establish our own boundaries. And those boundaries, if someone else is unwilling to acknowledge and respect those boundaries, sometimes we have to draw that very hard line in the sand. And if you can't, you are either going to be in or out of my world, or I may have to remove myself from this space because I can't. Right. And we have to understand that sometimes those traumas that the other person may be experiencing, it's not for us to validate or invalidate those things. It's not for us to decide whether or not that's legitimate. That individual has to work through that for themselves.
Because it's legitimate to them.
Because it's legitimate for them. And if we love them, we acknowledge the legitimacy for them, even if that's not our truth. It is theirs, and they need to work through that in whatever way they need to. And out of love, we try our very best not to work against their healing process. But it's not a perfect experience. And certainly when you start talking about it between parents and children, it gets even muddier, because our children will say that there are things that we've done that we absolutely did not intend, that they process as trauma. And in our world today, there are a lot of things that fall under that trauma umbrella. Some, I would argue, aren't so legitimate, but but it is real for them.
Yeah.
And I love you enough to acknowledge that it is real for you, even if that's not my reality. But boundaries sometimes have to get established. I'll tell you, my own kids, I've been blocked many times by my children.
Oh, I thought I was the only one.
You're not the only one. I've gotten blocked a few good times. Generally, it's brief. But my kids have blocked me a few times. Like, if you send me one more text, you're getting blocked. And my daughter will text and she'll say, disengaging. So I know she's going to go silent for a little while.
And you know what? Part of that we probably talked about.
It comes with the territory. So please know, for all of you who are listening, even a relationship expert has issues with her own children. Okay, like there are none of us who escape the experience of having to have that mirroring experience. And what I mean by mirroring, that is to say that the one set of individuals who are going to hold up a mirror to your face are going to be your children.
That's right.
Guaranteed.
That's right. Guaranteed.
And anything that you thought nobody else saw, your kids saw it. And they're going to tell you about it.
So we got about 4 minutes left. Okay. I want you to talk about your new podcast that's coming out. It is called Messy and Fully Human, which is basically what we've been talking about today.
Right. It really is. Yes. So I'm very excited about it. It's something that we had been talking about doing since summertime. I had actually intended to start during the summer, but things just got so busy that I just couldn't dedicate the time that it deserved. But I wanted to create a space where we give ourselves permission to not be perfect, that we don't have to do the shame demons of perfectionism, whether we're talking about our romantic relationships, our partnerships, our parenting, the drama that happens sometimes in the workspace, because let's be clear, there's workplace trauma also that takes place, because we are human going into all of these spaces. And the more you want to connect, the deeper you're trying to connect, the more work you're trying to do, the messier it's going to be. So if we're going to really do this thing that America has not been doing so well these days, when it comes to really building relationship, we've got to be okay with getting a little messy to welcome in what it means to be fully human. So we are launching our podcast officially as of January 2024, and you can check it out on all platforms. But everything new that's coming out is going to be on alveanlyons.com, ALVEANLYONS.com. You could always email me if there's a show you want me to do. I'm so in, because it's really for all the people, and it's my therapy too.
Oh, that is fantastic. So in the last 2 minutes that we have, again, tell people to set a goal.
Yes.
Decide what you want your holiday to be.
What do you want it to be before you step into it? Preparation is the most important investment you can make in having healthy outcomes. Prepare in advance. Have some of those conversations ahead of time. For people who are willing to listen, it'll be the greatest gift. For the people who aren't, you decide where you want them to fit in this holiday season, because at the end of the day, you are responsible for your happiness.
Absolutely.
Don't leave it to anybody else. Be good to your inner child, because he, she, or they are looking to you as the adult to be able to let them know that this is safe and we're going to be all right.
Now, your family just got together.
They did.
So people want to know where and how they can listen to her podcast. She said that it will be on every platform.
Every platform. Yep, absolutely.
Wherever you get your podcast.
Wherever you pull your podcast from.
And it will start January
2024. And if you are unsure, just go to alveanlyons.com and we will send you exactly to where you need to go.
There you go. There you go. So your family just got together for your dad's birthday.
Yep.
What are you doing for Thanksgiving?
It's so funny you said that. My sister asked me last night, what are we doing? I said, listen, I just got past dad stuff, okay? I'm just trying to breathe right now. So our game plan is to get together. My sister lives across the street, as I mentioned. We're definitely going to combine our two households and then just kind of leave it open for all our family, as in friends that have become family, to come enjoy it with us. Because, to me, family is both love and blood. And
Absolutely.
I will take both.
Oh, that is fantastic. Hopefully we will see you again
for
the
sure.
round table. It will be the last one of 2023. So we're going to have to.
We have to have a good one, a solid wrap for an incredible year that I must admit there are some days I want a little bit of a refund on. 2023 has been a beast.
I've looked through my life and most of the major events, positive events in my life, have happened in even years. So I'm looking forward to 2024.
I'm with you.
Absolutely, I am. Thank you, Dr. Alvean Lyons.
It is
As
such a
always,
pleasure.
it is
Thank
a pleasure.
you.
And we hope that this hour has given you the tools you need to make the holidays stress-free among family, or at least keeps the strife to a minimum. It might be a good idea to share this show with your family ahead of time. Just go to anotherviewradio.org and download the podcast. And be sure to sign up for our eView newsletter. It's a once-a-week reminder of upcoming shows. The Another View crew is taking the Thanksgiving holiday off, and we wish you and yours a very happy and safe holiday. We will be playing instead Turkey Confidential by The Splendid Table from noon until 2 next week. Our theme music is an original composition created especially for Another View by Jay Sennett. Lisa Godley is our show producer. Jordan Christie is our audio engineer, and Dr. Barry Graham, he answered our phones. That didn't ring today. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving, everyone, and we'll see you in 2 weeks for the next Another View.
Support comes from Hampton Roads Community Foundation, carrying out your charitable wishes forever, whether it's helping shelter animals, feeding the homeless, enhancing the arts, or supporting students. Learn more at leaveabequest.org.